Okay. Some more housekeeping. So I think the plan is that we'll have 20 to 30 minutes. Teresa told me that there will be a 5-minute warning that will jump up as a pop-up for us, and then we'll all get popped back to the main group automatically. And just like in the main session before, the chat feature is enabled. So please submit any questions or comments that you have during this. My team members, Lauren and Jordan, will be helping to answer questions if they can during the presentation when I'm screen sharing and I don't see them, or they'll flag me down. We'll also probably have a time for questions at the end. Okay. So I am going to actually drop a link to the map in the chat. Like Teresa said, if folks want to open it and click along and start playing themselves as they go. And I am going to screen share. All right, thumbs up if you can still hear me and you can see the internet screen right now. Excellent. Okay, so this is the website where there's direct links to the map. There's a user guide that is basically going to be similar to what we're walking through today. The data dictionary that says every data source we used, how we crunched it, a code book that defines each variable name. So you can refer back, but I'm going to click this link. It's the same one that I dropped in the chat to actually open the map. Okay. And the number one most important feature, the number one thing we want to know when we open the map, this is like a summary view. So this first icon right here that says show map legend, that is what is displaying in the table of contents for us right now. So nothing is interactive. So the number one thing, like the first thing about structure of ArcGIS Online, we want to click on this middle icon that says show contents of map, because once we get there, we see all the layers that we can turn on or off. So today, again, I'm just going to show us how to navigate around to get information, how to use the tools to customize and make your own maps like Teresa was talking about. So the first thing I'll point out is that we have two layers that are just boundaries. They're just geographies. So that's our city and townships boundaries layer right here and our tracks. So a way that we can turn it off, next to each layer, we have this little box. We can click and we can turn that off. If on the other hand, you wanted to see more clear boundaries and names for each of the census tracts, you could turn that on. The default view that we set is to have the city and township boundaries on because I think a lot of us don't know what census tract we live in or we work in. It's not a common feature. So to see how the census tracts really fit into a township or a city that you might be familiar with, and also where you have political representation. That's why we had that layer in there. Okay, so the next thing I'll point out, these are all the layers of the actual index. So here are the 5 categories that Teresa was talking about. Here's our overall score. That's what we're currently seeing in the map. Here's the demographic data. So the first thing that we can do, and I'll jump to another layer. I'll jump to health. You can hover over the layer name, like health here, and see how it kind of becomes a link and these icons up here. So if we click that, the first icon right here, we can click open. These are the legends. So again, the categories that we ranked the geographies into. Here's just that legend telling you what each color corresponds to. And when we actually start navigating in the map, we can click and navigate like this. We can zoom out, we can zoom in. Let's say I'm really interested in all these tracks in a dense area, like Ypsilanti. I can navigate in like that. And if I want to quickly just go back to the default view, I can click this home button to always get back quickly. So I'll say that there's maybe 2 main ways you can think about to get information from the map. So the first way I'll call is like the visual way. Maybe looking at the map, you know exactly what census tract you want to click on, or something jumps out to you. You can click on a census tract and we have a pop-up. This pop-up tells us the exact Z-score, the number that is actually causing the category ranking score. And it also reports all of the data points for the indicators like Teresa was talking about. So all the indicators that make up that category score and the specific data points for this community. The second other cool thing we have in here that we're excited about is we compare each of the data points to a threshold. So let's look at health insurance, for example. We see that there is a goal by the county to have 95.6% of adults with health insurance coverage. And we see in this community, we are zoomed in a small census tract, 83.8% of adults have health insurance. So that is falling a little bit below our goal. And I'll just, I guess I'll just like want to highlight that this is kind of two different ways of measuring the data. So we can compare to the threshold as like a benchmark or an ideal goal. And I know talking to the health department when we are interpreting this goal, these thresholds are really useful for measuring progress. And this is a different way of kind of measuring the results compared to the Z-score. So the Z-score tells us how a particular community is doing compared to the average across the county. So it's just kind of two different ways to, two different layers of information to kind of understand the data. And up here, of course, we also have the census tract name. And I think next, I'll jump to some of these icons that show up beneath each layer. These are options, kind of features and tools we can do. So the next one, I think, let's go back to our default view. Like Teresa talked about, maybe you're interested in getting a map specifically of an indicator. And let's change our category just to, you know, keep things interesting. So we can go to education. And again, I'm now looking at this third icon. It's the shapes that says change style. If you click on that, this is how you control what layer you actually want to show up in your map, like what you want to map. So step one right here, it's asking what variable do you want to show? We can change this from what it was, the education and training score, to let's do preschool enrollment. Teresa already showed us one, but we can do another way of mapping it. So when I clicked that, maybe you noticed like these numbers automatically changed. So it knows what the lowest value is amongst all the data and the highest value. And it's just assigning it to a color, lining them up in a row. But maybe you don't like this color. Maybe you want to create different categories. So in here, we have this color option. And we can, because it's selected, we can now go to options. I'll also just quickly point out, I guess, these are the two different options that you can kind of put, like display in a geography. This other one here is the circles, and it probably doesn't make as much sense for this indicator. It might make sense for the rate of infection, like the health department showed, or especially juvenile charges. Probably the dot density would be more interesting. But going back to the color option, we can click this options. And also, let me actually check in. Am I going too fast or too slow so far? Can folks give me a, doing okay? All right, good. Okay, so here's our options in here to change the map and create whatever kind of map you want for preschool enrollment. Our first option right here, symbols. This is where you could pick what color ramp you actually want. You could click any of those. The next option is to flip it upside down. So right now, this default one that came up for us, GIS just has defaults that they like to pop up with as the first option. We have this dark blue at the top, and we have this light yellow at the bottom. If we hit invert, we could just flip that. But the option I really want to show you is this first option right here where we could click and say classify. If you see that the legend changed, this is how we could say, I want discrete categories or rankings for you to put everything into. And then under here, we have options. Make sure you can see all these. We have options for telling GIS how we want you to make those categories. So the default and the one that we made all of our maps with actually is natural breaks. And that actually uses statistics to make sure that everything within a group is similar and maximizes the differences between groups. So as an example, if we had data points that were 40%, 41%, 42%, and 60%, it would probably put those three 40s together and then make a separate category just for the 60. So there would be different numbers in the categories because it's realizing that these are pretty close together. They're similar to each other, but they're pretty different from the 60%. But you might want equal interval. This would be an option if we wanted to do percentiles. So this changed to the bottom quarter, the top set, the top quarter, and so on. So that's equal interval. Quantile would be asking that the exact same number of data points go in every single category. So just dividing the total by the number of categories. But the one that I'm thinking about doing for us is manual breaks. This is saying, I know what I want to put in there, and I'm going to make one for the threshold. So we saw that a goal is that 75% of children are enrolled in preschool. So I need two categories, everyone below 75% and everyone above 75%. And the way that I can set that, there's this little scroller here. I can move that. I could also click next to it and type 0.75 for 75%. There's also this option right here. This is just asking for any tracks that we don't have data for. These are ones that are showing up as like the plain map background right now. Do you want to specifically call those some sort of other category? Or if you want, they could just be blank in the map. And then this might not be very clear to folks what this means. So we can also customize the legend. So let's say we want to call this 75% or higher enrollment. This is below 75% enrollment. And this is not reported or no data. You'd say no data. So I would say okay. I would say okay again. And on the layer here, we would have a new little name that says preschool enrollment. We would have our new legend, and that is what is showing up in the map. And if you wanted to make a PDF of this, maybe use it for research or a grant application, I went to print up here, and there's two options, just the map or map with legend. And I was just letting it load. It usually takes a few seconds. So there's a new map we made, and all of those maps that Teresa was showing, that's just the process for it. So I guess I'll keep going, and we'll check on questions at the end. Oh, thanks. It looks like we're moving on them. Thanks, guys. Okay, so I am just going to actually refresh to reset everything back to the original layers instead of going through the steps again to save time. And again, I need to make sure if I want to use the map, navigate or click it, I go on this second icon. And I'm going to turn off overall score, turn on another layer. That's maybe a good thing to note too. I've definitely accidentally forgot to turn on layers and have multiple going on. They're kind of showing through in the background. So I always recommend as best practice displaying one layer with data colored in works best. So I'd say another way that we can get information, maybe you are a numbers person, maybe you like lists of numbers. I will direct us to this second icon right here that says show table. When we click that, a data table pops up here. There's also a little option. We can make this big. We can make it smaller, but this is reporting the same data that is in the pop-up. It's just kind of presenting it as, you know, some numbers for us, and there's some more features here. So some of the things that we can do, hold on, close your eyes, let me get rid of that one. So maybe I'm scrolling along and something really interesting pops out to me, like, wow, there's 100% preschool enrollment in this community. Where is that? I could click it in the data table. So we see that it's become blue, that line. I could click these 3 dots right here for options. And I can say center on selection. Can you show me where that community was? Can you zoom to it really quickly? And I see, oh, that's where it is. Okay. And I can go back to the default quickly like that. And I can say clear selection. I don't want to look at that anymore. And I will click the X here to get rid of this other one that I accidentally clicked as well. Okay. So another thing that we can do, maybe you don't want to spend a lot of time scrolling in here, you're interested in ranking things. We can click on a column header like this and see some options. So maybe I want to sort descending. I want to see the highest, them ranked from the very highest score all the way down to the lowest. So that's something that we can do. And one more kind of wrinkle on this, we just realized actually, some of the indicators we kind of formatted to make more user-friendly. So any of these that have a percent sign in the data point and in the column name, or to make clear that a blank means that there was no data, we just realized that it's not sorting because GIS is having a little trouble understanding the numbers. So for those indicators, so anything that wasn't altered, you're going to see those options. But for these that are kind of italicized, they were formatted, there's just one more step to be able to sort those. So we can click the 3 dots again and go to show hide columns. There's actually more data in here. There's columns that were created when we made the maps. Things we're just not showing everything to make it simple. But in this case, let's go to 3rd grade reading proficiency and click to turn that on, because what that's going to do, that's going to show us the 3rd grade reading proficiency. That's just the raw numbers. That's not formatted. So this is 3rd grade reading proficiency with percent sign. This is just the raw data. So see how it's kind of how Excel would automatically create the calculation. It's 0.76. And we can also sort this data. So we see the highest values there. One more thing we can do, maybe I'm interested in seeing where the top 5 highest rates are. I can click the first row. I can hold shift down on my computer. Mac users, I'm not quite sure what you would do, but whatever you would do, control, I don't know, and then hit the last one. And then again, it'll start to pop up and show us some outlines, and we can say center on selection. And just as we're kind of digging into this data and seeing what's popping out to us. And one more thing that we can do. So let's clear our selection, but maybe you're interested in these results and you want something final to print out, and that's going to show us those communities more clearly. In that case, we should use our filter feature. So filter is here. It is also in the data table. It's the same exact thing. Also, by the way, I forgot to say to include or remove columns, another option here. But so I'm going on this last icon and saying filter. And this is where I could put in like a criteria and ask the map to show me everything that fits that criteria only. So maybe I'm interested in third grade reading proficiency less than 50%. Maybe I have programming. That's an eligibility criteria. It needs to be 0.50 because for third grade reading, that's how the data was formatted. I can say apply filter. And let's make this smaller. In the map, we'll zoom out a little bit. We can see that only the communities that have a third grade reading proficiency score below 50% now show up as highlighted in the map. And also in our data table, only those 24 show up. And same process, if we wanted to make a map of this, a PDF, we could. And one more thing that we can do, oh, and to turn this off, I can go back to filter and say remove. Don't need that anymore. I can add third grade reading proficiency again. This is one that's kind of interesting. Another option on the drop down you may have seen is some statistics. So it's going to tell us our range of data, the average, and the standard deviation, and how many data points did we have data for that we could report here. So just some quick stats. The last layer I'll kind of call out. So those are some of the main features that we can do a lot with. The last data layer I just want to highlight is the demographic data. Let's close this data table. The default on this layer is the percent population of people of color. But again, if we click in an area, we have a bunch of demographic data on population size, race and ethnicity, age breakdowns, and we have these both for count and percents. And one thing to note too, I don't know that we've really flagged it today, but there are 6 tracks across the board that we didn't report data for. So there's 100 tracks in the county, and we reported 94 as a rule. We excluded 6 tracks where there was very low population. Perhaps the tract had an airport. It's mostly just an airport, for example, and tracks that are mostly dorms. But we did include those in the summary data so that we have information about all the areas in there. And I guess just the last thing that I'll say is I lost my train of thought, but overall, you know, while we're kind of taking the temperature and barometer and kind of some of the different ways that we've hoped to give comparison points with the threshold or with the Z-score, is recognizing that Washtenaw County overall on average performs well, but there are significant disparities across the county in communities. And so the census tract was chosen, as Teresa said, because that was kind of the smallest data level that we could report kind of at a neighborhood community area. But again, these kind of boundaries so that we know how things are rolling up. And I guess just the last thing that I'll say, there's going to be, I think Teresa's planning it on this opportunity index page on the website. We're also going to have a form if you would like to just get the spreadsheets of all the data. If you would like to get the shape files, which would be helpful, particularly if you have open source mapping like QGIS, there'll be a form just to put your email address and get that data. And another thing to flag that will be in the upcoming session, if you have access to ArcGIS online through work or school or personally, library, anything like that, there are some additional features for things that you can do if you are signed in, for example. So all of this, you don't need ArcGIS Online license or subscription. We can all do this. But I think in the next session, they're gonna, show how they add all these layers to another map, and they keep putting more layers on there so we can see intersections between different data points. So I will stop there and get out of screen sharing for a moment and see how we're doing on chat. Any questions or comments?
That was great, thank you. One question I had was, do you think it's possible at all to get a feature where we could measure changes over time as you get kind of different data sets in there?
Yeah, great question. Oh, and now that I'm out, I see 3 minutes. So sorry if I took a lot of time, guys. Yeah, so I know that the recent resolution that passed with the county commissioners is support for updating the index every other year. So I would imagine how we've been thinking about this is kind of the baseline. But I would imagine that once we layer on updates, that there would be some sort of way that we can compare over time. Yeah, so basically, I guess the answer is it's not in this one yet, because this is kind of our starting point with some new indicators, but I would think in the future. Did that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Cool. And I'll try to start reading the chat here to see if I'm caught up, but anyone else raise their hands or ask any questions? And we can hop back in the maps if we want to, but I know that was a lot of me talking at you. Yeah, just confirming at Ellie, I think the plan is to break this up, definitely to post it and try to break it into little segments. So if folks don't want to listen, for 20 minutes, maybe it's just like, how do I change what the map is displaying? How do I get started in ArcGIS? Click the middle icon. So yeah, plans to share and maybe even improve. Yeah, and voter turnout. So that is in our community engagement and stability layer. It should be active voters. Would be the indicator's name.
That's another variable, another filter. It says voter Z.
Ah, good question. So that is actually a different variable. So based on how we made the index, and let me go to the website and go to the methodology. I think we had a good screenshot here. Sorry, bear with me for a second. And shout out to Shruti Narahaseti. I don't know if she's here, but she made this original graphic. The shorthand of how I labeled the variables was, let's see, can I make this bigger? Voter Z is the standardized Z-score of the voter label. So there would be a voter indicator, and then voter Z is the standardized data of the voter layer. And if I go back to here, let me go back to 100%. This code book right here, hopefully that provides a little method to the madness of the variable names. So if we go into community, voters is going to be the name of just the raw data before we made it more user-friendly. Voter Z is that standardized layer. So overall, that's the kind of format where we kind of abbreviated the name of the layer. And then we had a Z-score for every single